Okay, so the first hormone I want to talk to you guys about is insulin. So the two biggest players that we have to look at in terms of hormones are insulin and cortisol. So we'll stick with insulin first of all. So insulin is a hormone secreted by the beta cells in your pancreas, and its function is to help shuttle nutrients from your blood into your cells. So when you eat a meal and it gets digested and then absorbed into your bloodstream, insulin is released to take those nutrients out of your bloodstream and actually get them into the cell. So when your body detects that your blood sugar goes up, it releases insulin in response, and insulin can do its thing and get the nutrients into the cells. Okay, so if we look at a real basic crude diagram of coupled together here, so we have blood sugar here and then time along there. So imagine, say, first thing in the morning, your blood sugar is pretty low. So you have something to eat, and then that's going to send your blood sugar up. Okay, so eventually it's going to hit a point, and your body's going to detect that it's getting a little bit too high. So then that's the key signal to tell the body to release insulin to bring the blood sugar down. Because if the blood sugar keeps going up, it actually becomes toxic. So insulin is released, blood sugar comes back down again, like that. And then say blood sugar is low again, and say, just for example, you have a mid-morning snack, say 10 o'clock, something like that. Same thing happens again, blood sugar goes up, insulin is released, and then it comes back down again, like that. And hopefully those peaks and those troughs, they aren't too sharp, and they're controlled. So one of the things you need to think about is that different types of food are going to create a bigger spike in those meals, in the blood sugar from those meals. So things that are very sugary, for example, say for example on a pure sugar, say, that's going to give you a massive spike in blood sugar and hence insulin, than say something more low glycemic than say, I don't know, brown rice or sweet potato, for example. So the danger is that obviously the body's going to release insulin in response to food. If that system is continually overwhelmed, so say you're always eating sugary, massive amounts of sugary food, always getting massive releases of insulin, eventually the cells in your body start to become desensitized to insulin because there's so much of it running around all the time that it stops responding as well. So I had a good analogy the other day about that. Imagine going into a room with like a strong smell. The first time you go in, you're like, oh, you notice it, and then when you come out and then go back in again, it's not as bad. So it's kind of similar to the way your cells, especially muscle cells, respond to insulin, is that if it's continuously high, like chronically high all the time, eventually they're going to become unresponsive. So that's what we call insulin insensitivity, which is bad news because it makes it a lot harder for your body to control your blood sugar adequately. And also what's going to happen is that if you do become insulin insensitive, obviously it's more likely that instead of when you do have food, it gets shuttled into your muscle cells and used as energy or stored for energy, it's going to go into your fat cells. So obviously if you're trying to lose fat and get leaner and lose weight, you want to try and improve your insulin sensitivity so that when you do have food, energy goes into your muscle cells, you feel good because you've got good energy, but also you're not continually feeding your fat cells all the time. Obviously if you're trying to lose fat, you want to try and minimise their size, and you want to try and get them to release energy, not keep putting energy back in again. So obviously, as I just recap, so when blood sugar goes up, insulin is released. Insulin helps bring blood sugar down by helping nutrients be absorbed from the blood into the cells. So that's the main job of insulin. Okay, so the next hormone we need to look at is cortisol. Let's say, along with insulin, it's probably it's one of the biggest players in terms of your success at fat loss and obviously building and maintaining long-term health. So cortisol is a hormone released by your adrenal glands in response to stress and also low blood sugar. So when we talk about stress, obviously there's two different types of stress. There's acute stress and chronic stress. So acute stress is, for example, you get involved in a car accident, like instantaneous. Your heart rate goes up, adrenaline's released, cortisol's released, everything's going a million miles an hour because your body's trying to get into that fight or flight type situation because it recognises there's danger involved. When we talk about chronic stress is like a prolonged, continual grinding stress, so stressful job, stressful family life, lack of sleep, bad diet, that sort of stuff. And really what that does is it just continually keeps that fight or flight system just kind of on almost all the time. So your adrenals are just continually pumping out cortisol in a vain effort to try and help you get out of that situation. Obviously, because your body doesn't recognise that work stress is always going to be there and family stress and all the rest of it. It's just trying to do its bit to try and help you get out of trouble. So if we look at a normal what a normal day should look like, all things being equal. So we've got cortisol here with that green line. That's the time of day that we've got there. So first thing in the morning when your blood sugar is very, very low, your cortisol should be high because that's kind of give your body the energy to get up and go in the morning until you start getting some food in you. And then obviously as blood sugar stabilises again, cortisol production should start to come back down again. Obviously it's very rare it's going to look like a perfect looking sort of single slope like that. But this just gives you an idea of what it should look like. So in the morning it should be high, it should get you going, and as the day progresses on it should come down to lower levels so that your body's relaxed and it's ready to sleep and do all those kind of regenerative processes it needs to do to recover from the day. So the kind of spike we cause on the morning and drop of the night is what we call your circadian rhythm, and that's what helps your body get into a routine, if you like. So it knows when it should be awake, it knows when it should sleep. And it's kind of the same as what you do, when you've got young kids, you try and get them into a routine with sleep patterns and getting up and everything else. Same thing for adults really, you need to try and keep some sort of schedule so that your body knows it's got like a timetable to release certain hormones, so you're awake in the morning and sleep at night. Obviously, unfortunately, the world we live in now, obviously there's a lot of chronic stressors out there. Obviously work is a big one for a lot of people, especially who work long days, long hours all the way through the day till late in the evening. Obviously being under artificial light all the time as well can affect you because your body's primed for natural light, so that you get up in the morning when the sun's up, you've got energy, and then as the sun goes down your body should start to calm down, ready for bed. Obviously because we have artificial light and televisions and computer screens and all the rest of it, that gets thrown out. And interestingly enough, I saw a interesting study this week actually. They said about people who had disturbed sleep patterns. They took them out camping in the wilderness, away from electrical disturbances and artificial light, and actually able to re-establish their circadian rhythm and their sleeping patterns pretty quickly once they reduced exposure to those stresses. So obviously going back to chronic stress, what we need to look at, rather than just looking at insulin and cortisol on their own, it's important to understand how they work together, because once they work together you can understand how people can develop problems like diabetes even though they don't necessarily eat a lot of sugary food. So insulin and cortisol we call antagonistic, so they work in opposition to each other on a very basic fundamental level. So insulin brings blood sugar down, so when your blood sugar is too high, insulin's released, cells get the message in to take nutrients out of the bloodstream and absorb them. Cortisol goes the other way for the most part, and it's basically, it gets cells to release energy, so you've got energy to deal with the stressor in front of you at that particular time. So first thing in the morning obviously you want energy to get up and actually get out of bed and do stuff before you eat food. If it's an acute stress, obviously your body's going to release loads of energy to give you energy to get out of the way, to run away from danger or whatever it is. But then with chronic stress, obviously that system is always going, so that cortisol is always going. It's always got your body in that slightly catabolic state. For the most part, it's going to break stuff down. It's trying to release energy into the system for you to do stuff. But obviously, you can't run away from it or do anything, and it's happening every day. And it's continually putting that load on your adrenals and on your body to continually produce this stress hormone. And the interesting thing is as well is that the relationship between insulin and cortisol is a bit like a seesaw. So if I use this crude pen as a demonstration, so what will happen is that insulin will go up to a certain level. Blood sugar is going to come crashing down again, because obviously the cells are taking the sugar out of the blood, bringing it back down again. And then what will happen as blood sugar crashes is that cortisol will go up, because it will try and rebalance you back the other way then. And obviously blood sugar goes too low because blood sugar goes low, cortisol goes up through the roof, and obviously then, because cortisol tends the cells to release energy into the bloodstream, the blood sugar goes back up again, and then insulin's released, boom, like that. So what happens is we kind of get this teeter-totter or seesaw effect. And what we want to do really long term is we want to try and balance these out so we haven't got massive shifts between the two. We just get, throughout the day, we just get small fluctuations like that, so we're a bit more of an even keel as we go. And one of the things that happens is that people don't realise is that, if you said to me, what's the best diet to gain a lot of fat very quickly and destroy my health, I would go starve yourself all day, eat a massive meal at night. Because your cortisol is going to be through the roof throughout the day. So there's going to be this continual battle as your blood pressure goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Your body's trying to minimise itself, but it can't, between cortisol and insulin. Obviously, the more insulin you release during the day, every single day, the more insulin insensitive you become, so it becomes easier to hold fat, very hard to lose the fat, which is what you want. And obviously that's when you start, going down the road of almost pre-diabetic type symptoms, because you can't control your blood sugar, because your body doesn't want to respond to the insulin anymore. And obviously it's a weird thing to grasp, because you haven't actually eaten lots of sugary food all day, you've just kind of starved yourself. But because of that interplay between cortisol and insulin, that's what creates the problem, because as you spike cortisol, eventually you'll spike insulin, and then back the other way, backwards and forwards, and that's what gives you those issues, those long-term issues. So the body's always stressed all the time from having to pump out loads of cortisol. At the same time, you're losing sensitivity to insulin, and insulin is the key for you in helping you maintain your blood sugar, and that's what you want long term, is better maintain your blood sugar within healthy ranges throughout the day, so you're not continually telling your body to kind of break parts of your body down and then convert that energy into more fat. So we've got a basic understanding of insulin and cortisol on their own, and hopefully together as well, that you can see that your body kind of releases them in response to what's going on with the opposing hormone, and kind of a basic idea of why really long term we're trying to keep those on an even keel. So one of the things we can do is regular meals, focus on low glycemic foods, so obviously low glycemic carbohydrates, plenty of vegetables, stuff like that. Good quality proteins and fats are all going to help. One of the things I want to talk about as well, because obviously there's a lot of, I've noticed it more in female clients more than males necessarily, is there's a lot of talk of kind of almost like water retention, inflammation, and it's definitely more a problem with women, and they also tend to have a harder time dealing with stress long term, more than men do as well, possibly because men have got more testosterone, so they can take a bigger hit of stress and still keep their metabolism pretty healthy and keep lean muscle mass on. Whereas maybe with women, also they get knocked around a bit more. So what I'm going to do is just do a real basic crude diagram of what I would call the merry-go-round of sorrow in terms of not getting results. So if I get this one into shot so you can see. Okay, so at the top here, we'll start with stress. So say stress is eating foods you're intolerant to, say, unstable blood sugar puts stress on your body, not eating obviously puts stress on your body, dehydration, not sleeping, those sort of things, the basic fundamentals that we need, nutritional deficiencies put stress on your body, okay? Obviously external stresses like work stress, family stress, relationship stress as well if it's chronic. So we start with stress. Obviously stress means that our cortisol levels are going to go up, obviously because you're always trying to deal with that, which means your blood sugar levels are going to go up. Obviously, eventually, if your blood sugars go up, eventually insulin is going to be reduced, so your body's going to try and balance out your blood sugar and try and bring those back into line again. And then when that happens, inflammation goes up throughout the body as well. So that's actual cells and cells becoming inflamed because of what's going on inside the body. And obviously when inflammation goes up, your stress goes up, and then the cycle kind of continues again. Obviously this is a very crude diagram of how that kind of works, but what you kind of need to do is you need to kind of get the basics in place first of all. So maybe 3, 4, maybe even 5 times a day if you need to. but most importantly good quality foods and foods that you're not intolerant to, so you don't get that stress reaction from A, starving yourself after death all day, and B, reacting to foods that may be healthy. I know nuts, for example, something that your body's very intolerant to them. And you want to try and reduce as much stress as possible on the body. Obviously sleep's a big one as well, because that's how your body can deal with stress and inflammation, funny enough. But if you're chronically not sleeping very well, then that's going to put more stress on the body. And then also you need to be aware of the foods that you eat are going to help your body control inflammation throughout the body. So things that cause inflammation are, there's certain nutrients and foods that cause a lot of inflammation, especially when imbalanced. For example, omega-3 and omega-6 fats. If there's a big imbalance there, most people tend to get too much omega-6 in their diet, especially with things like nuts and stuff like that, and nuts being present in food, versus things like salmon, fish oils, oily fish, that sort of stuff. It's got more omega-3. That imbalance in itself is very inflammatory, and in fact omega-3 is why it's one of the key supplements, as it helps your body deal with inflammation, because if you're chronically inflamed, basically your whole body's going to struggle, because the inflammation is going to be present pretty much everywhere, so even in your brain, in your gut, in your muscles, in your joints, everywhere, so it makes everything a lot harder, especially when it comes to fat loss. If you have chronic inflammation, it's going to make it a lot harder to get any results, let alone the results that you actually want. And also, if you reduce inflammation, it's going to help with sleep and just stress in your brain. Also, things like things that kind of tend to grind you down, when things feel a bit too overwhelming. If your body's not as inflamed, doesn't worry about that as well. You tend to find sleep's a bit better, and you can kind of handle stress a bit better. So obviously, what we need to do is we try and break this cycle that we have here by managing stress and inflammation as much as we can with a good sound diet. Make sure there's no major nutritional deficiencies, make sure you're not eating foods you're intolerant to, and improving your sleep as best we can, because that's kind of the foundation. If you've got that nice healthy foundation to work from, then the results are going to come a lot easier, and just long-term health is going to be improved as well, which is the key, because especially if you've got chronic stress all your time, I'll mention this in my next video. Your body actually robs certain precursors for your sex hormones to make stress hormones, which is why if you're stressed all the time, your sex drive is almost non-existent, because your body robs the things that it would do to make your testosterone and estrogen to actually make more stress hormone, cortisol. So you can see why if you want to get things balanced as they should be in terms of health, and then it's easier for your body to actually burn fat and do all the things that you want it to do, and obviously get the results that you want as well on the scale and on the old calipers as well. Okay, so hopefully that's helped. That's like a real basic, crude introduction to those two hormones. What I'll do in the next video is I'll talk about a bit more in detail about kind of long-term stress and how it affects all the other hormones, because that's something important to understand as well. Okay, so as ever, any questions or comments, let me know. Let me know if obviously this is useful as well.